and welcome to this week's episode of #Leadership What's on Your Mind. Remember, we're a podcast to make you stop and think about your leadership journey, and we're going to add value by speaking to amazing guests with amazing stories and experts in their field. So today we're speaking to Tom. How are you doing, Tom? You okay?
Very good, my friend. How are you?
I'm not too bad at all. So thank you so much for your time today. I can't wait for you to tell everybody why you're on, because there's a very good reason. You are a world-class trainer, specifically expertise in NLP. And it's been great to get to know you over the last 18 months. And I know on recording this, we met in person for the first time yesterday, which was really good. So while I hit the 20-minute timer, for the people who don't know you, tell us all about you and what you do.
Okay, so yeah, my name is Tom Phillips. I'm a Scouser, born and bred in Liverpool. I've lived in lots of different places, moved away quite a bit, but I always seem to end up back in Liverpool. So I think my heart's telling me something. And yeah, launched my first training company 13 years ago, having spent 18 years in the pharmaceutical industry. So I'm a Scouser that used to sell drugs. Doesn't get any better than that. And for the last 13 years, been working alongside the pharma industry, which is where I started. We've also moved into doing a lot of work with the NHS. So they're one of our biggest clients at the moment. We work with med tech device companies and a few of the clients as well in areas outside of that. Specialize in 3 areas. One of those is leadership and management training and coaching. The other one is sales, because I'm pretty much a salesman by heart. I spent 90% of my corporate career in sales and different roles at different levels. And then the other one, which has really come into the fore probably in the last 3 years and certainly the last 12 months, is mental health and well-being, which the NLP has always kind of underpinned, always been a part of. And more recently, I've personally qualified as a clinical hypnotherapist. So I've been helping lots of people with stress and anxiety, of which there has been a fair amount in the last 12 months as well. So that's kind of my journey in a nutshell this far.
Awesome. Excellent. So let's get the 2 questions through then. So obviously we're #leadership, what's on your mind? What comes to your mind when you hear the term leadership?
I think I've had some great leaders in my time. Certainly my last boss in my time in pharma was brilliant, a guy called Mark Scruton. He was just great for my development, encouraged me, supported me. The best thing about Mark that I always remember is whenever I made a cock up, he didn't have to tell me. He just said, "You won't do that again, will you?" And I was like, "No, I won't do that." So I've had some great leaders like that. I've worked with some great leaders in pharma, in the NHS. I've developed some people as well from, not being in leadership positions to being really, really great leaders for their organizations. Probably one of the best ones, a guy called Pete Moss, who I met as a very young and experienced regional manager many, many years ago. He then became the European sales director for a company called Hill-Rom, who are the biggest provider of hospital beds to the planet. He now runs his own company. He's been doing that for the last 18 months. And because of what we do with leadership and management, I've had to study so many different leadership models from so many different sectors. So I think I've been exposed to the best leadership models on the planet. I'm an accredited situational leadership trainer. So situational leadership by Ken Blanchard. I got introduced to that very early in my career. It stuck with me. And I think that's one of the most powerful leadership models you could ever get your head around. You've also got self-leadership. So it's great for people who are maybe aspiring to a leadership role. Models like Kouzes and Posner, 5 practices of exemplary leadership. That again, I think is a great model as well. Really helps people to get their heads around what they need to do to be effective leaders. And we use these models with lots of different sectors that we work with to help people, regardless of where they are on their leadership role. And I think when you look at it, there are some consistent factors that all good leaders have, regardless of which sector they work in. And you'll have seen this in the military, and I've got friends in the military. So they kind of cross all of those boundaries. I'd say when I think you look at things like Kouzes and Posner's model, they're 5 practices. I think if you get those 5 key skills under your belt as a leader, you're never going to go too far wrong. So they talk about having a vision, which I think is critical for every leader. You've got to know where you want to be and where you're going to take your team and your organization, but you've got to share that vision. You've got to build it with them. You cannot just go into a team or an organization as a leader and go, right, here's my vision, because your team and your organization will quite rightly say, well, good luck with that. It's not my vision. So you need to build it with them. Things like empowering the heart. So allowing people to take action, to take risks and make mistakes so that they learn. And I think one of the best things you can ever do as a leader is to understand that just because somebody does something differently to you doesn't mean that it's wrong. It's just different. Okay. And the way that we did things when we were in leadership positions in years gone by doesn't necessarily mean that those are the most effective ways to do it anymore. I think things like reward and recognition, that's absolutely huge and powerful. When you're a leader, one of the best things you can do is give people the recognition they deserve. It doesn't have to be massive grand gestures. It just be the little verbal pat on the back or little email that you send to somebody saying, you know what, that was a great performance last month, or I love the way you handled that team meeting the other day. Your presentation was brilliant. All of these factors, I think, when we understand them as leaders and managers, and more importantly, we act upon them, we make them part of our toolbox as leaders, make us incredibly effective. And I've been lucky enough to work with loads of different models, so I get to cherry pick the best bits, and then we either go and do a training program on that model, or we incorporate it into the leadership programs that we run.
Yeah, awesome. I love that. There's a couple of questions I'm going to come to actually
Yeah,
on what you said there. So, staying with you specifically, we always ask people about where your leadership journey started and how far back can we go on that, whether it's on reflection or
yeah,
it was a light bulb moment at the time. Where do you go back to?
When you asked me to think about that question, I was actually thinking, I think for me, it goes back to being a Cub Scout.
Okay.
I remember, whether anybody else kind of enjoyed it or not, I always enjoyed taking a leadership role, so whether we were putting up tents or making campfires or whatever, that was very much part of me back then. I loved it. I carried that forward. I was in the Air Training Corps for many years. I was living in London at the time. I was the youngest cadet flight sergeant in Middlesex Wing. So I got that role at 16. I put my stripes on, which was great. And then that very much carried forward into my pharma career, because I wanted to spend a certain amount of time at a kind of a grassroots level, if you want, learn my trade as a salesperson. So I worked in primary care, worked in secondary care, worked at health authority level, which is very much a typical career structure within pharma. But then as soon as I could, I wanted to get into a leadership role. So I got my first regional manager's job when I was, I think it was about 32. And then progressed from there to be head of sales. I had positions in marketing along the way. I was kind of a national sales manager for a while in one of the companies I was in. So I was a second line manager, looking after managers, looking after teams. So I think it goes right back to when I was 7 or 8 when I think about it. And I can still remember some of the things I did when I was in the Cub Scouts, that were very much kind of leadership type roles, if you like, the type functions. Yeah. And that's probably down to me wanting to be in that role, throw myself into it, and kind of taking the opportunities. But I think, again, that's what good leaders do. They look for the opportunities to get involved, to kind of roll their sleeves up and develop their skills and learn from their experiences.
Yeah, awesome. I love that. So, so much to squeeze into this little amount of time. So NLP, I'm conscious of some people might not know what NLP is. So could you do two things? One, explain to the listeners what NLP is if they don't know, but also I'd love you to share why I'm so excited about working with you and having you on, because you are at a world level, delivering and operating at NLP level.
Thank you. So Neuro-Linguistic Program was invented or created back in the 1970s by Dr. Richard Bandler and John Grinder. And they were fascinated by the study of excellence. They wanted to know what made really good people tick. So they were looking at athletes, they were looking at business people, they were looking at politicians, they were looking at actors, pretty much anybody that was really good at what they do, because they had the belief that if you could model those behaviors, if you could model their mindsets, you could reproduce it. And yes, there's always a certain amount of skill that's involved. So not everybody can be a world-class footballer. Not everybody can be a Jeff Bezos or a Bill Gates or whatever, but you can reproduce their behaviors and you can have a fantastic level of success as a result of that. So they started off studying excellence, and then they kind of came up with this term, Neuro-Linguistic Program, which is very much, if you break it down into the 3 component parts, it's neuro, so it's about our thought processes and what goes in our head, particularly our subconscious. And our subconscious is massive. In relative terms, it's the size of a beach ball compared to our conscious mind, which is the size of a golf ball. So we've got so much stuff that's going on all of the time that we're not even aware of. Some of that's good stuff, some of it's bad stuff. We have linguistics, which is obviously about the languages that we use to communicate, but not just with other people. It's more about the language we use to communicate with ourselves. Again, because that voice inside our head is so powerful, we need to make sure that it's constructive. And yet so many of us, I've done this myself, we're negative about ourselves, we're cynical, we have imposter syndrome, we have all these self-limiting beliefs that we don't really need to have. And then we have programming, which is really about the actions that we carry out on a day-to-day basis to live our lives, whether that's personal or business or both. And we know that the way we conduct ourselves, the actions we carry out, are very much based upon that voice inside our heads and the thoughts that we have. So what NLP allows us to do is it allows us to kind of understand the programs that we're running internally. And if we can identify the good programs, we can do them more often. So if you've got a program called business success, you can run that more often. If you've got a program called happiness or relaxation or pride or whatever it is, all the good stuff, you can run those programs more often. If you've got the more unproductive or the kind of unhelpful programs like stress, anxiety, low self-esteem, low self-confidence, what NLP does is it allows you to identify those programs, and then we can either change them, like you would change a computer program if it wasn't working, or you can actually delete them. So just like you would delete something from a computer that wasn't helpful. And that's how I was trying to explain it to people. One of the definitions I like is one that comes from Dr. Bandler himself. So he said that your subconscious is like a compass. If you give it a direction, it will continually move you in that direction, even when you're not aware of it. That's obviously what our subconscious does. The flip side of that is if you're not giving your life and you're not giving your conscious or your subconscious a direction, who is? So it's really worth thinking about. And then, coming back to, my passion, my involvement with NLP began technically about 13 years ago when I did my first practitioner program. I knew about NLP before that, but I'd never really studied much on it. And then over the last 13 years, I became a practitioner, a master practitioner. So they're kind of the stepping stones. I then became a trainer, a business practitioner. I've done my sports NLP. I've done other programs as well, things like neuro-hypnotic repatterning, which again is about changing the way that we think. And as a result of all that, I was lucky enough in 2016, 2017 to be invited onto a mentorship program with Dr. Bandler himself. So I've had the man who created the stuff as a mentor, which has been an incredible experience. I still speak to him on a regular basis. I now work as part of his training team when we do seminars in the UK and the US. All things being equal, before COVID, we were doing those 4 times a year, twice in London, twice in Orlando. So I'm constantly learning from the best that there is. I'm learning from the guy that invented it. I get to work as part of his team. I get exposure to him. I can chat to him one-to-one whenever I want. It's just been absolutely phenomenal. And so I am the only UK-based trainer of NLP that has been both trained and personally mentored by Dr. Richard Bandler, which is, great feather to have in my cap. And it has just been an incredible experience. And it would be like, I always try and give people analogies because we are big storytellers as a species. So if you were into social media, it would be like being mentored by Mark Zuckerberg. Or if you were into online retail, it would be like being mentored by Jeff Bezos, or if you were into innovation and creativity, it would be like getting mentored by Elon Musk. He is the top man in his field when it comes to NLP. And he's just, I thought I was good before I went into his mentorship program. What he's done to me was just taking me to another level.
And
amazing,
because I love NLP. I've dipped my toe in it because we did it in the military. I love that it underpins a lot of the, we're going to go to models and ask you a couple of questions about that in a second, but it's really eye-opening when you get people to just literally dip their toe in it. To the extent that you work in it is phenomenal. And I've got some really good friends of mine who are really good trainers as well. And it really gets people, my big passion is getting people to stop and think. And it certainly does that, doesn't it?
Well, again, one of the definitions that Richard will give to NLP is it's about thinking on purpose, which I think is just great. So what are my thought processes? Are they helpful? Are they not? Am I really thinking about what I want to be doing with my life? Am I thinking about where I want to be going? Am I happy with it? Because if I'm not, the responsibility is on me to change it. And so many people, unfortunately, drift through their lives. They wake up, they're 65 and they're retired, and they look back at their life and go, how the hell did that happen? Most people spend more time every year planning their holidays than they do planning their life.
I love that. How true is that?
Scary.
How scary. Yeah, it is. That's amazing. So I want to really dig into this. This is one of my things I say quite a lot about how do we take leadership off the page? And obviously you've mentioned a lot about models. I talk a lot about models. We're quite reactive to the people that are in front of us, that we can gauge what they need to sort of awareness, education, learning. But there's a lot of people who are not trainers, who are reading lots of books, looking at a lot of models. And I say, about how do people take leadership off the page? What are your sort of experiences and thoughts and encouragements of leaders who are doing all the right things, lifelong learning, but taking leadership off the page? What are your thoughts?
I think the best way you can do that is to actually put into practice whatever you're learning. Find out what works for you, use it, find out what doesn't work for you, and, you know, put it to one side. And I think it's always a good idea to have things in your toolbox that you can use. You may only get them out once in a blue moon, but they're always there for you. And this is one of the things I love about NLP. So the emphasis on the word practitioner, it's a very practical thing. And I think it's the same with leadership. You can read as many books as you want. You can study as many online courses. You can go on as many training courses as you want. But if you then don't implement that and change your behaviors and your thought test as a result, you're no further forward than when you were before you read the book or before you went on the course. And certainly the way we always design our training and our coaching is to be very practical. So we'll give somebody a theory and say, right, apply that now to your own real world. How are you going to use that with your team? How are you going to use that with your colleagues in the leadership team that you're in? Where are the kind of real learning points that you can implement? And then certainly when we work with people, you know, we follow up usually for a period of at least 4 weeks, depending on what the client wants, to say, right, since we finished the training course, how have you implemented what you've learned? So it becomes very much a behavioral change piece. And it's not just about reading the book. Yeah, it's very much about practical. And that for me, I think is a big key difference. So you're going to take it off the page, you're going to take it out of the textbook, or you're going to take it out of the YouTube video. How are you actually applying it? What are you learning? Because I think when you do that as well, you learn that actually you can enhance whatever you've been taught. So you take the model that was created by, you know, Cousins and Posner in the 1980s, and you have your own ideas about how you can make it better. And this is the way we continue to evolve with leadership and other things as well, to say, well, okay, I've got this, it works really well here, but if I use it over here, it's even better. Or actually, if I use it here, but I do this as well, it's huge in terms of the impact it has on me as a leader, the people around me in my team, the people around me in my leadership team, people above me, you know, if I'm reporting into people, if I'm not necessarily the top of the tree. That for me is how you do it. It's that practical implementation. You know, you don't learn to build a house by reading a book on building a house, do you?
You learn by getting lots of mistakes. So.
You do, absolutely.
Adapt, change, and overcome.
Yeah, well, yeah, or plan, do, review, whichever model you want to look at.
Yeah,
it's very much about that practical application. And you know, I will, my hand on my heart, I will say every training course we do, as trainers, we're probably only on our feet for 20% of the time. The other 80% of the time is you as a participant thinking about it, applying it, discussing it, getting feedback, changing your ideas maybe as a result of the feedback that you get. But it's always about that practical application.
Yeah, awesome. So, excuse me, we've only got 3 minutes. I thought we had 5 minutes. 3 minutes left. Time flies. I love having these conversations. So, language. I just want you to just finish off with, obviously, NLP is really powerful with the change of language that we use outward, but also inward, which you've alluded to as well. What are some of the big language changes that we can help leaders, people moving forward to level up their leadership and their communication to create that environment, but also that lifelong learning and that impact around them? What are your thoughts?
Loads. So there are two specific parts of NLP training if you go and do it, and you might have done this yourself. So you have the meta model and the Milton model. The Milton model is really about how you use language to communicate. The meta model for me is about how you listen to what's being said and also what's not being said. And again, that's whether you're listening to somebody talking to you or whether you're listening to yourself talking to yourself. And there are loads we can take from this, right? If I could give you 2 takeaway tips, okay. One would be one of the most powerful words you can add into your own vocabulary is the word yet. So whenever you find yourself doubting yourself, oh, I can't do that, you know, I won't be able to do this, just add that word in yet. You know, so I can't lead that team yet. It just changes massively the way you think about yourself and the way you think about that thing that you can't do. You know, I've taught kids to do this. I've got nieces and nephews, and they've actually fed back to me sometimes when I've been kind of a little bit cynical myself, and I've said, oh, I can't do that, and they've gone, Tom, you can't do it yet. We've actually created some NLP monsters.
Yeah.
And that's really powerful. Whenever you find yourself doubting yourself or you've had a bad experience and it's kind of knocked your confidence, just say, I can't do that yet. You will learn to do it. The other big one that I often teach people to do is, you know, how do you start your emails? I can guarantee you probably start your emails with, I hope. Yeah. So, hi, Stuart, I hope you're okay. Hi, Stuart, I hope you had a good holiday. Hi, Stuart, I hope you read my report. Hi, Stuart, I hope you come into the meeting next week. Think about that word hope and the kind of associations it has with it. They're not the strongest associations you can have. So I teach people, and this is happening loads the more I do it, to use the word trust. So, hi, Stuart, I trust you are okay. I trust you had a good weekend. I trust you read the report. Trust is a much stronger word in terms of the associations it creates for us. There's also an element of NLP in here that we call an embedded command. So we can put words, we can put sentences into our conversation and also in written communication that become like commands that slip past the subconscious or slip past the conscious radar. So when you hear, I trust, every time you get an email from me, you hear the word I trust you, or you hear the phrase I trust you, you begin to think, yeah, this guy trusts me. And so it really helps. Yeah. So these are some of the linguistics that we can play around with, and they're massively, massively powerful.
Amazing. I'm going to go back and check our emails for the
You
last
should
couple of days.
seriously go back and look at my
Yeah,
emails. They all start with I trust.
that's
How many
awesome.
emails do you send that start with I hope, and how many do you receive that start with I hope?
Yeah, I love that, because that's a takeaway that people can implement
Yeah.
straight away.
Yeah.
And I'm going to share mine as well, because I've created 4 little NLP monsters as well, because my big one I tell people is about nothing's hard, it's challenging.
Yeah, challenging. Yeah.
So I've told that to my children. I'm really passionate about embedding that in a kind of not in a dictatorship, but you're right. I get told sometimes when I slip up that it's challenging, not hard.
Yeah.
It's great to see, because they're sponges,
Yeah.
and it's great to see the impact that
Oh,
language change has at that age.
absolutely. I mean, if I could teach NLP in schools, I would. I think it's so powerful for this kind of stuff, because kids are great. They haven't developed the self-limiting beliefs that we get when we're in our teens and when we become adults. So if we can give them techniques and we can give them tools to stop that ever happening, it's huge. It's so powerful. Again, the example I would talk about is it never ever occurs to a child that they will not walk.
Yes.
No matter how many times they fall over, they never once think, oh, this isn't for me, I'm going to crawl for the rest of my life. Yeah. They just don't have those limiting beliefs that we develop, unfortunately, as we get older.
Yeah.
So yeah, if we could teach it to kids, it would be, I think it would be absolutely huge. Yeah. But you're right. It's the simple change of language inside our own heads, and both externally as well, has a massive impact on our neurology. Yeah. So we suddenly go from a position of being all doom and gloom because we can't do something to actually, I'm a little bit more optimistic, because yes, it's a challenge, but I know I will get there if I keep working on it.
Yeah. Awesome. So that's our 20 minutes, just over a little bit, but it's fine. We can sneak
Just
another
get it
minute.
going.
No, yeah. So Tom, thank you so much for your time today. And guys, if you're listening to us on your podcast provider, make sure you follow us. It would be great to hit as a review. It really helps the algorithm, really helps us pass this sort of information forwards. And I really like to hear your takeaways from each and every one of our amazing guests. If you're watching us on the YouTube channel, make sure you hit subscribe, hit the bell, and you'll get a new episode every Wednesday at 6 a.m. Make sure you look out for my vlogs that come out on Monday at 6 a.m. And it'll be great for you to join us next week with another fantastic guest. So Tom, thank you again for your time.
Always a pleasure, mate. Always a pleasure.
I'm going to put Tom's connections and links below, and we've got some exciting projects coming up in 2021. Speak to you soon. Take care. Bye.